A couple of videos ago, we talked about the big revelation from the first 2 episodes of Ahsoka, namely that there's something fishy going on in another galaxy. Well, maybe not fishy, whaley at least, because, you know, the Purgle, they took Thrawn there and they're in the map image. You guys get it, I don't need to explain it to you. But one sentiment that I've seen over and over again is that the idea of traveling across galaxies seems to break established rules regarding hyperspace. Now, is that the truth? Is Ahsoka diverging from established hyperspace standards as we saw in, for example, The Last Jedi? Well, let's talk about it. So there are a couple of principles that I want to reiterate for you guys. Some of you will roll your eyes, you've heard it all before, but for a lot of you, this is key to understanding the central question of today's video. The first thing we have to look at is, how does hyperspace work? And this is actually quite well addressed in as early as A New Hope. Technically, you can hyperspace jump anywhere. The problem is you need to plot your jumps, otherwise you're likely to run into something. When you go into hyperspace, you're really shifting into another dimension, that dimension being hyperspace, which itself is populated with the shadows of things that exist in real space. So if you jump haphazardly or you plot the route incorrectly, you could run into the shadow of a black hole or a planet or a sun, and that's likely to destroy your craft. I'm estimating that the shadows of objects in real space are actually significantly denser in hyperspace because space largely is empty. Hyperspace seems to be very difficult to navigate without established routes, and that is how most faster-than-light travel takes place. There are major hyperspace lanes like the Perlemian, but also a series of smaller ones which connect planets across the galaxy. Some of these were kept top secret, whether for military or economic purposes, and presumably what we see on the map in Ahsoka Episode 2, the pathway to Peridia, is just another hyperspace lane. Well then, why are they taking such a big ship? Couldn't they just hop in their Jedi shuttle, put on Life as a Highway, and hit the gas? Well, probably not, and there are a couple of reasons why. For one, it could be simply that the distances between galaxies is so great that without the sustained hyperdrive power of these various engines, it's not going to be possible to make it in any real time. So unless Baylan and Shin want to hop in a cryo tank and hope that Thrawn continues to age, well, that's not an attractive option. However, there could be another reason, and that ties in nicely to the second issue I wanted to discuss, and that's the general difficulty of extragalactic travel in Star Wars. This is a topic I've touched on a few times on this channel. I actually have a full 2-hour lore compilation video all about extragalactic and extra-dimensional travel if you're interested in watching after this video. But in general terms, travel outside the Star Wars galaxy is very uncommon, and that's not because of a lack of other places. I mean, the opening crawl says Star Wars takes place in our universe. There are, at least several 100 billion galaxies they could visit. Now, one of the issues has to do with distance and the difficulty of traveling a non-pre-navigated hyperspace route, as we discussed earlier, but just generally, it seems like leaving the galaxy is not easy. In Star Wars Legends, this was a topic that came up on a few different occasions. There is, for example, the Outbound Flight. That book, and really the material around that book, talk about how the Outbound Flight intended to use several Jedi Masters to purge basically a tangle of hyperspace anomalies which ran through the unknown regions and made extragalactic travel pretty much impossible. This was sometimes known as the hyperspace barrier. Interestingly, Legends usually refers to this barrier as encompassing the unknown regions, and in particular the western portion of the Star Wars galaxy, but it seems likely, based on how extragalactic travel is usually discussed, that barriers of this type were surrounding the entire galaxy. Now, there are notably some exceptions. The Star Wars galaxy has extragalactic locations which are close enough that even somewhat routine travel is possible. The most famous example of this would be Kamino. There are also small companion galaxies. You can actually see 2 of them in Attack of the Clones in Star Wars Wars canon, one of these is the Rishi Maze. In Star Wars Legends, there were 7 in total. But just generally, if you want to go outside of that sort of local area, travel is very, very difficult. As I mentioned, this was something that existed in Star Wars Legends, and canon has really done the same. Actually, it's done even more in that regard. Episode 9, although again focused on the unknown regions, shows how difficult it is to navigate through the outer edges of the galaxy. The Aftermath Trilogy 2 sees Palpatine trying to chip away at the mysteries and hyperspace disturbances to find a dark nexus of power beyond the rim. That book too has references to extragalactic explorers basically going insane. So in that extent, does the new material from Ahsoka violate the established lore? Well, the answer is still no. Although generally travel is difficult, there's nowhere that says there aren't exceptions. And in fact, in Star Wars Legends, for example, we know that there were small holes which permitted extragalactic travel. I talked about how the Jedi Council wanted to brute force one through, well, the Force, but some seem to naturally exist, including Vector Prime. I want to read a bit from the book of the same name. It's book number 1 of the New Jedi Order, i.e. the Yuuzhan Vong Invasion series, and it talks about the galactic barrier, and it's a very similar portrayal as in Star Wars canon. Scientists theorize turbulence existed beyond the small band of empty space surrounding the galaxy. Before that moment, no one had ever witnessed evidence of, let alone the actual event of, an extragalactic breach. Many scientists argued that such a breach could not be accomplished. Certainly, several brave explorers and a couple of desperate outlaws being chased by the authorities had gone into the turbulence of the galactic rim over the last few decades, but none had ever been heard from again. Presumably, the path between galaxies traveled by perhaps the precursors to the Night Sisters as well as the Purgle, and later our heroes and villains, is one of those similar routes, whether it's naturally occurring or perhaps made by some other means. It doesn't mean that the rest of the galaxy have that barrier which makes extragalactic travel very difficult. It's just this area doesn't, and it's possible that the ship they're constructing, the Eye of Sion, is not only meant to speed up the process, but perhaps is needed to punch a hole through what has sometimes been described the bubble that surrounds the galaxy. It does sort of remind me of the Outbound Flight where they put a bunch of dreadnoughts together. That was more for, I think, logistic purposes. This is a highly specialized vehicle, which I find very interesting. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts on all of this and more down below. Until next time, I'll see you soon. May the Force be with you.